Hey everybody, Mike Naso from Internet Partnership Radio with a video update on the tropics, and we do have Invest 90L out there getting close. I'd think to depression status, definitely organization much more than yesterday. Yesterday when we kind of had a blob here. Today we have a developing circulation center, so it does look like we will have to deal with this in some way, shape, or form over the next several days. As you can see, the upper level environment around the system is not all that favorable in the Gulf of Mexico with a lot of dry air, but the tendency for shear is not that high either. If you look at the latest shear map there, definitely low shear around the Gulf of Mexico and around the Northwest Caribbean with some here and there. However, that shear would likely increase by the time the system gets, say, in the middle or northern Gulf of Mexico. Lot to talk about today. Let's get straight to it at the satellite imagery of this developing tropical cyclone, I think. And there, right there, is probably where I think we're seeing the circulation start to develop, starting to get some banding type features. And right in there is where I'd guess that the circulation center is forming. However, it is entirely possible that the circulation is more in this area here. Again, it looks like this one has multiple circulations, or at least little twists that can deceive you in thinking which is the circulation. Definitely, though, starting to get that classical tropical cyclone shape. So that is why I think there is a good chance we will get a tropical depression in the next 24 to 36 hours, if not sooner. As I mentioned before, the dry air is going to be a problem for this system. As you remember last year with Arlene, it didn't have a lot of shear as it moved on up and nearly became a hurricane, but it had a lot of dry air, and that's what kept it from becoming a hurricane or even a stronger hurricane. And I think that is what this one's going to have to tend with, is some dry air. Now here's some of the models, latest GFS. This is in 78 hours, has it approaching the northeast Gulf Coast. Clearly the movement around would be off to the northeast. So the GFS, again, not picking up on an entirely well-organized system. And the NAM at 84 hours, compared to what it had been picking up on, has it going into Louisiana, but definitely not as organized as past model runs of the NAM had shown. The GFDL has it becoming a major hurricane, although I don't really think that's possible. I think the most this would be at the very most an upper category 1, and even that's starting to stretch it, and if that did happen, it would probably weaken before landfall. Certainly not a category 3. However, if you notice the track off to the northeast into the Big Bend area is something you got to watch. The latest Canadian 72 hours, Canadian MM5 and the NAM were good at picking up on the system, when just 2 days ago there was nothing there and they were forecasting in 2 days a storm, and we're like, well, where is it? Here it is. 72 hours, the Canadian has it making landfall in the Big Bend. And now here's the no gaps. The no gaps in 72 hours has a system in the northeast Gulf. But notice what happens from 3 to 5 days. There is a strong area of low pressure off the New England coast. And this is kind of reminiscent of Wilma. People are wondering, will this system stay down here? Will it move northwest? Will it move northeast? Will it cross Florida? And what will it do in the New England area or near the Canadian Maritimes down the road if it moves in that direction? Will it intensify into extratropical? So there's still a lot of unanswered questions to be answered over the next several days. MM5, 120 hours, brings the system into the middle of the Gulf and then starts to turn it. Definitely a tropical cyclone showing on this model. And finally, the general scatter plot, you can see currently it's moving east. However, most models hint that it will start to move northwest and then to the north and then off to the northeast. If I had to make a guess right now, my personal guess, I'd have to say it's going to turn sooner rather than later, because I do not think this trough is going to miss it. So if I have to make a projected path of my own, I'd have to make a pretty wide one, anywhere from, say, Destin to western Cuba, the Isle of Youth, and the Keys, which would put all of western Florida in the bullseye. Keep in mind, though, I'm Mr. Climatology. Northwest Florida and western Florida have been hit numerous times in June by hurricanes. It happens a lot, so this is not unusual by any means if it does happen. And we'll see if Alberto forms. Elsewhere in the Atlantic, we do have a nice tropical wave that just exited the coast and another one behind it. As the ITCZ begins to move further and further north, we'll begin to see these waves start to get twists and turns to them. Notice some model guidance forecasting some type of a system coming towards the southern Lesser Antilles in a couple of weeks. Not sure if that's going to pan out, but definitely something you want to keep an eye on. And in the eastern Pacific, we do have in the central Pacific a cluster of storms and some thunderstorms in the East Pac. Nothing to be worried about at this time. So I'm Mike Naisel from Internet Partnership Radio. Stay tuned to Internet Partnership Radio. In case we have to go live coverage, we will give it to you best if anything decides to spring up into the Gulf Coast.